All right, imagine this. You pour your heart and soul into your work, your passion, your art, and you're finally ready to share it with the world. Then the feedback rolls in. Some of it lights you up, others stings. Suddenly, you're questioning everything. Hi, I'm Ryan. My passion is to spark curiosity and inspire deep thinking and explore ways we can all learn and grow better. And today, we're talking about one of the most challenging and the most transformative parts of learning: feedback. Why does it feel like a gift one day and a gut punch in the next? And how do we give and receive feedback in a way that actually feels like progress instead of doubt? Drawing from my years as a teacher, let's explore some strategies to make feedback a tool for learning, growth, and connection. So far in this series, we've talked about why curiosity is more powerful than discipline, the foundational video for this current series. We've also talked about the power of a question. We've explored the role of curiosity in asking meaningful questions, hinting at how questions can drive growth. And yesterday, we talked about asking better questions. I received some feedback on that video that might require some clarification. You see, questioning is deep and it's a complex art form. Entire books have been written on the subject, and I'll likely have to make several passes over the subject in order to clarify over time. We'll come back around to that. So we've been exploring how curiosity and questioning drive growth, and feedback is the essential next step. It's the response that refines our questions and our actions and connections, but only if it's done right. So right now, we're going to break down the essential principles for giving and receiving meaningful feedback. Whether you're a teacher, a student, or anyone who values growth, I've recently noticed just how important it is to connect feedback to meaningful questions. So today we'll talk about how we can give better feedback and prepare ourselves to receive it. And like questioning, educational scholars have written entire dissertations on the art of giving feedback. There's lots to say about it. This video is just a broad overview, a very simple introduction to the topic, and we'll likely return to it in future videos. I remember that I wasn't always good at receiving feedback. I remember my peers and teachers giving me feedback on my writing. I was really good at taking the praise. Like, oh, well, thanks. Yeah, I am a good writer. Thanks. Yeah. But you know, when it came to improving my writing, their feedback felt more like a death toll. I was mortified. I was embarrassed that my work wasn't up to quote unquote standard, which is ludicrous because they already gave me the feedback, right? But it wasn't until I learned that I actually had the responsibility to my work, to the piece that I was writing, that I had to prime myself to receive the feedback. And I also realized that the best feedback I received had certain things in common. So let's talk about why feedback matters, because feedback can feel overwhelming when it's unsolicited. But if given thoughtfully and carefully with curiosity and empathy, it can be a powerful tool for growth. Because feedback isn't just advice, it's a bridge between where we are now and where we want to be. When it's clear and actionable, it accelerates the learning process and it builds trust between the giver and receiver. Educational expert Grant Wiggins emphasizes that effective feedback is specific, actionable, and goal-oriented. So 3 things there for you: specific, actionable, and goal-oriented. We're going to unpack that a little bit. But think about it, like vague comments like "good job" or "keep at it," they don't really help us grow. They're not feedback per se, because great feedback focuses on what specifically is working and what specifically can be improved in such a way that it inspires action. It's amazing how much we can grow through meaningful feedback, but not all feedback lands the same way. So let's dig a bit deeper into how we can use curiosity and empathy to give and receive feedback that really helps us thrive. So I want to next talk about how to give effective feedback, and then we'll talk about how to receive it. So first things first is to be specific. If you're giving feedback, make sure that the feedback you're giving is about specific, actionable things. Vague feedback can be confusing or even discouraging. Instead, provide concrete examples of strengths and areas for improvement. So for example, I was an English teacher. I gave a lot of feedback on student writing, so I'm going to use a lot of Englishy examples today. If I were to say to a student, your paper is really good, that doesn't really tell the student how to make it better, right? So instead I might say something like, your introduction does a great job of setting the tone, but adding more examples in your main body could strengthen your argument and bring it home for the reader, right? So it tells them what's good and what they can change in order to make it even better. It's also really important that the feedback be timely in order for it to be impactful. If the feedback is delayed, it loses relevance, it loses its urgency. So if I were to collect a stack of essays from my students and then not get it back to them until 3 weeks later, it doesn't matter what my feedback says. I might as well have just given them all an 85 and thrown them away, because at that point, 3 weeks later, they don't remember what they wrote, and it's not even relevant to what they're doing anymore. So the more immediate feedback they can get on it, the better. But you do have to be careful with this, because if you lay on too much feedback too quickly, it can quickly become challenging to the receiver to bear and process it all, right? So that's super discouraging, and it can be really deflating. In working with students on their writing, I would focus on giving them just one piece of feedback every time they turn in their papers. Otherwise, telling them all the things that were wrong with their paper became overwhelming for them. It was overwhelming for me. You might remember those times when you were in school when your teachers marked up your papers with red ink and handed them back to you. What happened to those things? Did you like keep them and love them, cherish them forever? Did you put them on your fridge? Most likely, in my experience with my students in my classroom, those essays usually end up in the trash. They end up in the trash on the way out the door, because there's just too much on there for them to process and digest without feeling like trash inside, right? They're like, oh, this means I'm a failure. Even if they got a fair score on it, getting something back that's highly edited never inspires action. It rarely inspires action. There's a whole potential for another video or even a whole video series on this topic. So I'm going to move on for now, and maybe we'll return to it in later videos. The last thing I've already kind of mentioned is to offer actionable suggestions, to make sure that your suggestions are actionable, right? That it doesn't just highlight what's wrong, but it offers next steps. So an example might be, in order to improve transitions in your writing, try summarizing the key idea of each paragraph before introducing the next one, right? Let me do that right now, actually, before transitioning into the next phase of this video. So this part here on giving feedback, remember, it's got to be specific, actionable, and prompt. All right, so now I want to talk about how to receive feedback productively. Feedback is a two-way street, and learning how to receive it is just as important as knowing how to give it. Most of us aren't trained on how to receive feedback, and I was probably 28 years old before the time I actually learned how to prepare myself for feedback. If you're a teacher, or if you're a manager, or if you're an adult who's never had this training or never given this training to the people you work with, it might be a good thing to talk about in your classroom or in your workplace. So here's 3 steps to help you make the most of feedback. Number 1 is to adopt a growth mindset. Carol Dweck's research on mindset shows that viewing feedback as an opportunity to grow rather than as criticism makes all the difference. Instead of thinking, this means I failed, try, this is helping me get better and closer to my goal. Just like curiosity opens doors, a growth mindset helps us reframe challenges as opportunities. It's all about that mindset shift. That's all the difference. But it also requires the action of listening. So active listening when receiving feedback, it's really hard to just not try to justify yourself or explain why you made the decisions that you did. But it's really critical that the receiver of feedback just open themselves to be receptive. So listen with the intent to understand. If the feedback stings, take a deep breath and remind yourself that this is not about you, it's about the work, right? And you have a responsibility to the work to make it the best that you can. So this is your role as the receiver to receive this feedback to the work, right? It's not about your quality or your value as a human being. This perspective will help you stay open rather than close up and get defensive, which is our natural inclination. And finally, you want to acknowledge the feedback and take time to reflect on it later. I always make it a point to say thank you for the feedback because it's hard for the giver to give feedback. I think it's harder for the receiver sometimes to receive it, but it takes a lot of work and intentionality and care and respect and empathy in order to give effective feedback. So I always make a point to say thank you. And then as you're reflecting on the feedback, you might ask clarifying questions like, what's one thing I can do differently next time? And you can even say that out loud to the giver of the feedback if they weren't clear on that. And use the feedback to create small, specific, actionable steps. Right? Growth happens one step at a time. It may be slow, and that's okay, but compassion is the key to growth. Mistakes are inevitable. This is life, right? But each one is a chance to learn and to grow and to be better. And that's what all of this work is really about. So let's wrap it up. Feedback, as I've mentioned, is one of the most powerful tools we have to support growth and build stronger relationships. Whether you're a teacher, a learner, a collaborator, these principles can transform how you give and receive feedback. I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. If you've got the most impactful feedback you've ever received, or perhaps even the worst feedback you've ever received, or maybe the struggles that you have in receiving feedback. I would love to hear your stories, your comments in the below. If you've got feedback for me, maybe use the ideas in this video to give me some kind, specific, actionable feedback. I would appreciate that. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe and all that stuff for more tips on curiosity, learning, and growing yourself. And if you're looking for more resources and personalized guidance, you can visit my website, Explorer's Edge, for free tools and one-on-one coaching. So let's keep growing together, one thoughtful question and one meaningful piece of feedback at a time. And I will see you in the next video.